where not just women are in danger, but all marginalized people, where being uniquely different right now might truly be considered a crime. It seems as though we had all slipped into a false sense of comfort, that justice would prevail and that good would win in the end. Well, good did not win this election, but good will win in the end. So what today means is that we are far from the end. Today marks the beginning of our story. The revolution starts here. The fight for the right to be free, to be who we are, to be equal. Let's march together through this darkness, and with each step, know that we are not afraid. That we are not alone. That we will not back down. That there is power in our unity, and that no opposing force stands a chance in the face of true solidarity. And to our detractors that insist that this march will never add up to anything,
Boston Red here with Friday Java, a weekly magazine of political theory, polling, and commentary. It is part of the history called people that make up this fascinating journey. We are part of the Obama network. For that, we make no apologies. What we pledge to do is give you the facts, unabridged, the history, what body politics is, the most up-to-date theories of political science and psephology. Stay tuned for this incredible ride. Boston Red, peace out. From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, the episode Friday Jobber on the 6th of March 2020. Boston Red here in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. We'll visit our friends at the Crystal Ball, that's the University of Virginia, Charlottesville, and we always remember Heber Harb when we do this. Their discussion here primarily is on Super Tuesday, and we'll highlight it and make some commentary on it there. Let me just start off with this, and then we'll go to probably California next. Anyway, nonetheless, Joe Biden's challenge on Super Tuesday was a bill on his victory in South Carolina. We have commentated before about South Carolina. South Carolina, the Democratic Party there, is composed of followers of O.J. Simpson. African American, it is a much more conservative or moderate African American population in South Carolina. And when you look at what happened there in South Carolina and how the corporate media framed it, we'll use the word framed, that it was a Superman type of victory for Joe Biden. And in fact, the Crystal Ball said not only did it accomplish that, but Biden was a William Tecumseh Sherman in reverse, using the South as a springboard to move north in force. And one thing to remember is that in the South, as in some of the northern states, the Democratic Party establishment or machinery tipped the scales for Joe Biden there. So thus what happened in South Carolina and the way it was framed, that it was a miraculous victory, it was not. Joe Biden was expected to win South Carolina, but the point was, the question was, by how many points would he win? And they had a turnout in South Carolina much more than normal. Bloomberg didn't hold his Well, he was not on the ballot there, but Tom Steyer did not do as well as he had hoped to do, thus he dropped out. But they also mention here, the crystal ball. Maine. Now, Maine is a very interesting state in itself. If I recall, Maine was a state that Barack Obama won in 2008. Period. But Maine is also a state that has a conservative base there. Remember, they had, what was his name? LePage, I think it was. The nutty one was in Maine, and of course Maine also has Susan, what's the name there, the Republican, Collin, the Republican type. So it is not a bastion of liberalism. Now, what happened in the Commonwealth is we can only assume. I have to dive deeper into it. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Biden pulled that one off. The officials Democratic officials in Massachusetts primarily was supporting Joe Biden. Not only that, we have what's called the uncommitted. They were able to come in and vote in Massachusetts and thus help pull Biden to a victory there. And you had a situation where Biden was first, then came Bernie, and then came Liz Warren. Of course, Liz Warren has now dropped out. It was an unfortunate situation. We'll talk about her before the broadcast is over. And in the state of Minnesota, now that was the home state of Amy Klobuchar. Now, Amy Klobuchar, oddly enough, dropped out on before Super Tuesday, and she had her turnout vote machine, which Biden used, and was able to utilize it and win Minnesota, because the state officials in Minnesota, the governor, etc., were all Biden supporters. Now, that does make a difference. Now, when they had the caucus there, which was not as structured, Bernie Sanders in 2016 won that particular structure. So that is the difference in that state and how that happened. It was very unfortunate. Amy Klobuchar was, I believe, number 2 or 3 on my list of candidates at one time in this primary contest. We started out with Bernie, then we had Beto, and then after Beto, Liz Warren. Beto dropped out, and then we came up with Bernie, Liz Warren, and then Amy Klobuchar. Well, Liz Warren and Amy Klobuchar are long gone, and Bernie is in the race, and we'll talk about that in a minute also. Now, as we move on, North Carolina, the Democratic Party officials in North Carolina, as was the case in Virginia, supported Joe Biden. There's no doubt about that. And thus his victory in North Carolina was not surprising, nor in Virginia. You had the officials in Virginia, including the governor, assuming he was not in blackface this time around, they all supported Joe Biden. So when you have a Joe Biden victory there, that is not unusual in Virginia, the place where Lee had his headquarters, literally. Now let's look at a little bit of this. In most counties, Biden was claiming outright majorities. Conventional wisdom adjustment, Biden performed well, no doubt, with African Americans. But there was a little positive news for Bernie in the suburban areas or Appalachian parts of the state, regions where he had shown a modicum of strength in 2016. Bernie also won, if I recall, in West Virginia in 2016. Virginia set the tone for the night that Biden performed in the suburbs that carried over to places in other regions like the Twin Cities in Minnesota. Sanders' weakness in rural parts of Virginia, well, that was to be expected, were indicative. That's usually where the Republicans hang out. Of other regions like eastern Oklahoma, where he performed much worse in his 2016, showing us around the area where Jerry Pippen used to be based, but has turned into a very conservative type of place. We'll have a technical presentation on this later where we'll get into these states and do some deep diving. It's not very surprising, and this is back to the crystal ball, that very well came out of Super Tuesday with Biden with more delegates. They go to decision. Des HQ showed Biden up 501 to 438 over Bernie. That takes into account the February contest. And those really in February, it didn't have very many people in them. Now, they have not counted in California. That'll take longer to bring out. In that sense, Biden overperformed. Now, a lot of polls had Bernie overperforming, not underperforming. The dramatic and sharp shift in the race were driven in no small part by signals that Democratic leaders had been sending to the base since Nevada, what they believed are the perils of nominating Bernie Sanders. No doubt about that. The Democratic Party has been firmly embedded with the corporate interests in the U.S., period. Now, the dropping out there of the right-of-center candidate from South Bend, known as CIA Pete, and of course in Amy Klobuchar, period there. Sanders supporters will cry foul, and we are crying foul, saying the establishment is taking the nomination for them, but party leaders could only make the argument at the point of the primary season. It's up to the voters. It's really not up to the voters. It's how the party frames it, and the party still has a tremendous turnout machine in all of these states. Now, again, they go into absentee ballots there, where he rolled up a 30-point victory. Biden likely would have won states like North Carolina and Texas by a more significant piece, or they call chunk here, not already cast before the surge. Meanwhile, arguably wasted the 10 days following his victory in Nevada. I don't know if Bernie wasted the 10 days. It's quite possible that there's nothing Sanders could have done to reassure Democratic leaders and voters who were concerned about his ability to win the general election. Well, there was other concerns about Joe Biden's ability to win the general election. That's why Mini Mike came into the race. Now, they also bring up this old boogie person, Fidel Castro. Fidel's, of course, dead now. And they go on to say and this is the crystal, you got to remember, the crystal ball is one of these middle-of-the-road, right-of-center type operations in the Democratic Party, run by Dr. Larry Sabato. Defend him against certain aspects of the regime in Cuba. He said that his vice president nominee would have to support Medicare for all, a proposal that strikes even some Democrats as political and practically unpalatable. He declined to attend. Now, I'm not sure on the Selma March. I did notice Bernie was not there. Commemoration in Alabama. Now, unfortunately, Selma was full of people that, like John Lewis, that are supporting Biden. Not only that, I remember, I believe it was last year's, a year before last, celebration that Bill Clinton was not there, and G.W. Bush was there. So a lot of people don't attend those, period. He was the only major Democratic Party nominee who did not show up. He continues to rail against the Democratic establishment, no doubt about that. We'll have to go further to find that out. None of these things are that important on their own. Put together, they didn't help Sanders change any minds amongst Democratic leaders. No doubt about that, because the Democratic leaders were always solidly against Bernie Sanders, as was the corporate media, as with Trump. Now, as far as this old charge of socialism, socialist, that DJ Trump's going to bring that one up 1,000 times, and Joe Lunchbox Biden is once again going to have to get through his or being overshadowed by Dodgy Biden, his son there. Now, again, they are talking about primaries here. Republicans have had a contested primary as well. That was in 2016. No more there. Bernie even pulled off Utah. Very unusual situation there. After Nevada, Democratic leaders had a short window to work to stop. At least these characters at the crystal ball are not sugarcoating it. The Democratic Party was out. Stop Bernie Sanders. And now he'll go to Michigan. Now, one of the big problems is in Michigan, Bernie will no doubt be in first or second place. But when you go to states like Ohio and Illinois, the Illinois Democratic Party, the remnants of when Barack Obama were there, all these people are supporting Joe Biden. That is to be there, no doubt about it. In Ohio, the officials in the Democratic Party, what's left of it, are supporting Joe Biden. Now, New York is a little bit different, but they have very peculiar laws there. In Pennsylvania, that's a state that Hillary Clinton lost. We'll see where that turns out. Now, Biden seems very likely to win in Florida. That's on March 17th. Now, in Georgia, very interesting there. You have Jimmy Carter there. Jimmy actually voted for Bernie in that situation there. Sanders also has not expanded his own base. That is something that has to be done, period, as much as he possibly can do it. They say Michigan's a big test. Now, Michigan's a state Bernie beat out the monster in. It's also a state that DJ Trump beat the monster in. Now, Mississippi, yes, Bernie had to cancel a trip to Mississippi, ways of time to be that, and probably Missouri by a smaller margin than Mississippi. Mississippi, again, is a party made up of followers of O.J. Simpson. They go on to say it has similarities to Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Tennessee. Now, none of these states are going to be places where Joe Biden could possibly win, period. And this is where things get a little bit complicated, and they, I guess, do sum up. Biden has plenty of liabilities that likely will prevent what now appears to be a Democratic consolidation. There's no doubt about that he's going to excite many. He has a long voting history, and now Bernie Sanders is talking about that long voting history, and DJ Trump is taking notes. But with Sanders rising, nowhere else to go, both voters and quote-unquote what they call party elites were going with Biden. They had no place else to go. A week and a half ago, the hour was growing late for Bernie's opponents. Amazing, the hour is now growing late for Bernie. Well, they're happy about that, period. Anyway, let's move out to California here, and we'll get back to this guns thing and what happened down in Milwaukee. Systematic racism there in Milwaukee. The coronavirus is a good place to bring that up. The VP Pence finally admitted that the U.S. was not prepared. They will not have out, quote-unquote, the test kits until the end of next week. DJ Trump tried to say that they did have those out. They did not have them out, period. So again, this whole situation gets a little bit confusing at times because of confusion that has been placed out here. Before we go, as far as the COVID-19 virus is concerned, the big flashpoints now are in the Republic of Korea, and Japan is fighting with them. The markets are down this morning in Asia and continue to be down. We'll have on the Numbers Man, part of WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network. It's called the Numbers Man Show. We'll talk about this, and we'll talk about some working papers on what has happened with the Fed. Now, since we last talked, the Fed has cut the interest rate amazingly 50 basis points, which is very, very unusual. There was speculation that they would cut it for the entire 2020, 75 basis points. They've already done this as stimulus programs coming from various quarters, including the IMF and etc. And we'll explore some of these working papers there from the Pete Peterson International Operation. They talk about stimulus and where stimulus will go. Now, just briefly here, what is happening, at least in the U.S., you had underlying weakness in the U.S. economy, in spite of what D.J. Trump's administration says, prior to COVID-19. What is happening right now is that this weakness in the economy has not really been exposed. What we have is, in terms of consumers, etc., consumers were weakening. This is before COVID-19. We won't be able to measure COVID-19 for another month or so. We're in March now. When you get the March figures in, you'll get something of the idea. But what you are getting now is fear and disinformation by the Trump administration. Trump came out and just basically blew off COVID-19 and said that it could be controlled by restricting entrance into the U.S., quarantining people, barring entrance to the U.S. That has not happened. There is now various people sick that have not been out of the U.S. In fact, in Kirtland, Washington, there are people in a what's called an extended care facility that have become sick there, and things are a little dismal. The management there is discombobulated, and part of this problem is that those people are working on what they used to do. That is no longer applicable. The whole scenario has been turned upside down. They need to get the information out there. Families are not getting any information. In fact, one woman was interviewed, I believe it was on the BBC, and she had to walk around the facility, and finally she saw a mother inside. But is her mother sick now? Evidently not, but she's elderly, recovering from a knee operation, I believe. But this, again, these people are not putting the information out there. It's not coordinated properly, even by the authorities in Seattle. Definitely not by the Trump people. They had laid off 40% of the people in Atlanta at the disease center there, and thus at various other the National Institutes of Health, and now they're stuck with this. One of the things that Bernie has to emphasize is that the healthcare system in the U.S. is dodgy at best. They don't have enough beds. They don't have enough expertise, and what has happened is many of these medical facilities in rural areas and even in urban areas have been closed. And these so-called not-for-profit medical operations have cut back, closed, and used a business model and not a medical model. And this is where big problems come here. And depending on how COVID-19 does evolve in the U.S., more and more holes will start to be apparent. And at the same time, we have some dodgy people, this Jim Baker character, don't want to forget him, that went to jail in the 80s, is now back in the game again, and he's trying to sell colloidal silver, which is a preparation that supposedly will fight infections and build the immune system. Now, there's no evidence that it does anything with COVID-19 or any type of virus of this nature. I've heard of people using that before for inflammation. Yes, it perhaps would work with some local inflammation. But as far as what it would do even for the common cold, it is dodgy. But they're selling literally, I believe, 6 packs of the stuff for like $300. And there's a cease and desist order out from the Attorney General James in the state of New York. So we are starting to see some movement there, and you want to stay away from these quack cures, because really there is no cure, not even in the medical world, other than to deal with some underlying items. Like a pneumonia, they can treat that. They have some drugs that respond to pneumonia. And also many of the people, it's north now of 80,000. Our models have talked about 100,000, and now we are revising those. But anyway, it is north of 80,000. We're not too much here at WBRN, Boston Red Network, giving the numbers out because the numbers will change. The number of dead, obviously, from anything will change. That is not the issue. What we're looking at is the system itself within various countries and how that is being handled in a systematic manner. Let's go to this poll here. We want to do it. Real Clear Politics. The only reason we want to look at the poll is that I believe this is a poll from North Carolina. On the week that was, we'll have more of these polls, looking at them, and we'll make some commentary here about what happened there. Now, this is out of the state of Michigan, Detroit, WDIV TV has Joe Lunchbox Biden ahead by 6 points, 29-23. Now, Bloomberg, Warren, Mia Petey, and all the rest of these are gone. So we're going to need a new poll. Literally, that is the way it's going. The national poll here, they have Biden up by 4. It's the YouGov internet-based poll here, 24-28. Again, Bloomberg, Warren, Buttigieg, all these characters are gone. The only one is around is Tulsi Gabbard out of Hawaii. Now, the University of Georgia poll, head-to-head contest between in the state of Georgia between Biden and DJ Trump. DJ Trump is up by 8 over Biden. He's up by 11 over Sanders. Give about Warren anymore. She's long gone. Generic ballot here. This is from YouGov. The Democrats up by 30. I wouldn't worry too much about that one. And let's see. That will move around. The last poll out of Minnesota, Data Progressive. That's a different kind of setup there. Had Bernie up by 5. Now, that was before Bloomberg's performance. He was at 16. Amy Klobuchar was at only 2. Unbelievable there. And out of Virginia, this is Change Research, had Biden by 20. That turned out to be about right. 32-27, then Warren, then Bloomberg, and Klobuchar didn't get in there. This was out of Virginia. The other data for Progressive had Biden up by 15. So we knew, looking at these polls, we knew that it was up there. And then we have Civitas poll out of North Carolina has Biden up by 27. Data for Progressives had Biden up by 9. So Biden, this is in the state of North Carolina, which went on Super Tuesday. Vermont, we don't have to worry about. In Maine, now this poll turned out to be oppositely the wrong direction here. This is Maine Change Research here. Had Bernie up by 19, didn't materialize. And by that time, Bloomberg was in trouble, and the rest of them didn't show up. That's one way of putting that. Data for Progressives had Biden up by 9, and Liz Warren's at 20, Biden's at 25, Bernie at 24. Bloomberg didn't do as well there. Tennessee, they had tornadic activity there. They had Biden up by 7. I don't have the final word on Tennessee, but then came Bernie. Bloomberg is gone now. Arkansas, Biden up by 13 there. He won Arkansas easily. Oklahoma, they had Biden up by 7. That's the state Bernie won the last time around. In Utah, Bernie was up by 6. Bernie did end up winning Utah. And let's see. Oh, we got to get this one in here. This is Gallup, the approval rating. We'll have more on that. They have DJ Trump at 47. It is the quote-unquote Cadillac of polls. 47 there, and disapproval at 51. This is DJ Trump. And IBD, that's Independent Business Daily, has DJ Trump's approval rating at 41. Now, that is a fairly accurate poll there. We'll have more on the week that was on it. And on March the 2nd, we're going to worry about California. Bernie won California. Stanford poll, USA Today poll, Emerson poll, all the California polls. The one poll Emerson, the Texas poll did not pan out for Bernie. They had him at 31, Biden at 26. That was before a lot of these people dropped out. Little Petey dropped out. Klobuchar dropped out, and Beto O'Rourke in Texas endorsed him. Now, High Point poll had Bernie ahead by 8. I'm not sure what that was about, but it did not materialize either. So those are some of the polls here. Michigan, I'm not sure we'll get the TV poll up here, but here we go. Many Michigan vote. Oops. Joe Biden is leading the way there. Now, what they have here is most important issues here is facing right now is Trump 27.3, Trump 20.7, healthcare, jobs and economy very low in Michigan at only 7 point. Divisive politics 7.2, environment and climate change has never been very high there. For respondents older than 50, more concerned about Trump 37.4, and they then are concerned about help only 19.2. So healthcare is not a big situation there. If we look at the favorables there, Joe Lunchbox Biden is at 68.5%. We can forget about Bloomberg. He was on 39.5. Bernie at 61 is unfavorable at 26.3. And Liz Warren down there, she's no longer in the contest, was at 51, her favorable there. Biden has a lead of 6.7 over Sanders when respondents were asked who they would select of all 14 candidates on the ballot there. He's at 29. Bernie was at 22.5. All these other candidates have disappeared. Little Petey was not doing very well there, nor was Amy Klobuchar. Beating President Trump, 63% of the respondents, 18 to 29, are more concerned about beating Trump. 42.3, 30 to 29-year-olds, 38.2 of 40 to 49-year-olds. Shifting to a favorite candidate who agrees with them on the issues, the 50 to 64, 54% in that age group wants a candidate who shares their stance. Overall, beating Trump was the biggest issue there. Now, that is what happens when you start talking about beating Trump. You have to understand that the way that it is presented to people, and Bernie has been presented to them in a very negative light. We'll see how that pans out there. This was a poll of 600 people. The live operators was conducted 28th through the 2nd of March. Has a margin of error of plus or minus 4%. There's what had happened there. Mobile and cell phones, 46.2. This was by WDIV and Detroit News that commissioned this particular poll. Anyway, let's go now to California. We haven't gotten there yet, but we will get there. Take a look. Now, let's do this. Let's go to Milwaukee. Now, this is reported there. This is at the Miller Brewery there in Milwaukee. And according to this is Gowan. Anyway, current and former workers at this is Molson Coors Brewery here. So there's a long-held culture of racism, including racist cartoons placed in the workplace, the N-word strolled in break rooms, bathrooms, nooses hung at the facility, one on the locker of the worker who killed 5 co-workers. Anyway, police have not provided a motive. This is Anthony Farrell. He killed himself inside the famous brewery that produced Miller for more than a century. He used to drink Miller beer. Don't believe that was a factor. Alfonso Morales, a Latino police chief, I can recall. I forget the old fellow's name now. Was the chief of police. He was a nasty one. There in Milwaukee. But Milwaukee is known as a city that racist all around. Neither racism played a role in the shooting. The department is not aware of any of the victims targeted there. Don't know who the victims were. Mr. Farrell, an African-American who worked as an electrician at the facility for 18 years. A noose was found at his locker. That we do know. And other people are commenting. A fellow named Muhammad Everyone knows the environment we worked in. It's just a sad situation, but it actually happened. He, Molson Coors, Canada, and Coors out of Colorado, was not working the day the news was reported. Our HR team notified him, according to them. This is the Washington Post, incidentally. But there are no two ways about it. We have more work to do. This is from Colin. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. A lot of those people live in areas, incidentally, that DJ Trump carried around Milwaukee and got his victory in Wisconsin. There's no doubt about that. This guy named Muhammad, they call him Jamal Swami, anyway. And Muhammad said he never took it to the management because when a guy was making a joke in front of a supervisor, the supervisor didn't say anything. It's a good old boys club to this day. There was a saying on the brewery floor, no blacks, no whatever, said a current worker who spoke on condition of anonymity. And a man named Robert Powell, also was a sanitation worker there, said he saw the N-word in bathrooms, period. He recalls a conversation with Farrell that was in March of 2016 while they were on break watching a basketball game. He was a cool guy. He didn't show any type of aggression. But when Powell, who is an African-American, said he was thinking about applying to transfer to the brewery, Farrell had warned they will hate you down there. So that is kind of what is happening there. These racist cartoons and what have you there. Not unusual. In many of these places there hasn't been very much work done on this whole atmosphere of hate, which has been revived. And you can blame that on the conspiracy theorists, the ones that have denied that President Obama was born in Hawaii. That all, as they say, fan the flames. That goes all around. We have all these issues today from Colonel Silver and the quacks out there. The Flat Earth gang is there. And then they're in association. These right-wingers support the police union types. In fact, Amy Klobuchar today called on the current state's attorney there in Minnesota to reopen the investigation into Mayon's frame-up for murder that he did not commit. Burrell. Electricians earn more than $32 an hour. Period. The culture of the company was very, very toxic. This is from some guy named Claiborne. And a local senator there, Lena Taylor, who is running for mayor of Milwaukee, said she spoke to workers since the shooting about what she characterized as a racially toxic environment at the plant. So in other words, this has went on for a long, long time. When the Milwaukee plant was still owned by Miller, that was in 1984. Coors, then the chairman, chief executive Adolph Coors, and you can have a name there, saying that African people lacked intelligence capacity. And there was a boycott at the time of Coors beer when they were riding very high, at least on the East Coast. The company signed an agreement with African American and Latino groups to hire people from that, invest money in minority-owned business, increase the number of distributors. Miller Brewing paid $2.7 million to settle a racial harassment lawsuit brought by an African worker at the company's plant in Fulton, New York. The company closed the plant shortly before settling the lawsuit and laid off 900 workers. So this has been a whole situation. The outcome looms over concerns about racism at the facility. Beer sales nationally are also always slipping. Molson Coors announced in October that it will be closing its Denver office as part of a corporate restructuring plan. Some jobs will be moved to Milwaukee, but the company will lose between 400 and 500 jobs. And Farrell was an in-house type there. He lived in a modest Rambler in Milwaukee with his beloved Doberman. He had long suffered from chronic back pain. I don't know what that has to do with it. Anyway, he was happy working there, I suppose, according to this article. Anyway, this is the article. Let me get Karen Tumley in here. It was an article by her. Super Tuesday results have Trump spooked. And for good reason, she said. I'm not sure if he very spoke about it. This is Karen Tumbley, a columnist there on the 4th of March. She's been around, as Jerry Pippin would say, since Christ was a corporal. One of many things we learned on Super Tuesday is this: the perception that the Democratic Party has lurked to the left is greatly exaggerated. The results of what amounted to a nationwide primary were an endorsement of gradualism over revolution and pragmatism there, according to Karen Tumbley. This is more than anything else we've seen lately should scare Trump. It obviously does, as evident by increased desperation and panic efforts by Trump and his team. The president is filling his tweets with laments that Sanders is being mistreated. There's no doubt about that. No doubt the Russian bots are there. I don't know about the Russian bots, but the corporate bots are busy. But then what would you expect? Trump's apparently so terrified of Joe Biden that he felt compelled to commit an abuse of power and led to his impeachment. The campaign for 2020 nomination has taken more than its share of seemingly impossible turns, and there may well be more to come. But at least for now, the party has returned to its original theory of the case, which is that the man who served number 2 to Barack Obama, and basically he rode Barack Obama's coattails, that he, Joe Biden, period. Biden dominated amongst conservative, moderate primary voters. That's not exactly a surprise, no doubt about that. But in the South, the thing was African American voters. In the early goings of this primary season, he was shaky. Well, he's still shaky. This is the most important thing to remember. He's still shaky there. Finished miserable in Iowa and New Hampshire. Ran a distant second in Nevada. He couldn't do anything at all. And that is a situation that Bernie Sanders, young Latinos, no doubt about that. Mini Mike just didn't do it. The once robust candidacy. Now, this is the interesting thing about Liz Warren. And Liz Warren, of course, senator from the Commonwealth. She was, I don't know, humiliated as placed to third. She was expecting to place probably at least second because Bernie had been ahead there. And of course, then when Biden came, that did Liz Warren in. Liz Warren, one of the big problems Liz Warren had was coming out of the gate. Her base was basically liberals, not necessarily progressives and college-educated types and Europeans. That was Liz Warren's base. And she catered to those people, and they pumped, $12 million into a campaign for California and Nevada. Did not work out for Liz Warren. That's very unfortunate because Liz Warren's a very accomplished person. She single-handedly founded and put in action the Consumer Protection Agency, which she would be credited in the history. She hasn't endorsed anyone. Will she endorse Bernie? Will she endorse Biden? That's very difficult to say right there. She evidently didn't like Bernie because she claimed Bernie said that she couldn't win because she was a woman. That's not the issue. Liz Warren, at least in our opinion, Liz Warren could have won this contest, and she could have been a president. Now, there were some mistakes there, but these were past mistakes about her ethnicity, claiming to be an Aboriginal or Native American, and no doubt she has Native Americans in her family. But again, that was a custom out in the state where she was from. Jerry Pippin explained that to me once about, it was a little different. Jerry Pippin actually had a daughter, and of course, no doubt Jerry Pippin was a European, and so was his wife. But they had a daughter that was actually on the quote-unquote Cherokee Road. How she got there, I have no idea. The woman looks as much about like an Aboriginal Native American as does Warren. Now, Warren, interesting, if you look at her older brothers, they tend to look more about what we think a Native American is. Their skin is much darker, and so are they. So, and again, this genetics working in, period. But now, will the Trump administration focus on Joe Lunchbox Biden? There is no, excuse me, there is no doubt about this. Hugh Hewitt, I get him right in a minute. Biden pulled off a McCain-style comeback. but we didn't see a President McCain. Well, no doubt about this, but totally different situation there with Joe Lunchbox Biden. Our model, the Ouija board model, has DJ Trump still ahead in the presidential contest. Could Joe Biden win this if he were the nominee? Well, the question is yes. Could Bernie Sanders? The question there is yes. It would have to be it would obviously be a different type of race than, say, with a Joe Biden. That is something we have to remember that would be happening out there. And let me just check 1 minute here. And we'll go now to California. How winning California keeps Bernie competitive. This is written by Kyle Kim. Anyway, Joe Biden campaign came to life on Super Tuesday with winning the majority of the 14 states. The result transformed a wide-open race crowded into a two-person race. 97% of the precincts reporting Sanders controlled one-third of California voted. A larger need for the for the Associated Press (AP) there. Bernie had 33.8, and at that time Biden had 25.1. Bloomberg, and he had 14, so he didn't do badly with all the money that he spent. And Liz Warren had 12. And it goes on to say Bernie's biggest loss was in Solano County. I don't know where that is. Biden won it by 29, up around Sacramento, Bay Area there. The biggest victory was in Los Angeles. He won that by 90,000 votes. He racked up big margins in the Central Valley and the largest cities, winning over areas he lost to Hillary Clinton. And it kind of shows you where he won areas there, and where Clinton won in places like Fresno, Sacramento, San Francisco, and L.A. This time around, Bernie won in virtually all of California. Won 34 of 38 counties he lost the last time around. Results so far is he won 155 of the state's 271 delegates had been awarded so far. So he did very well there. Still far from the final, but the tally so far showed Biden claiming overall lead for the first time, but with the 144 delegates still to be, Bernie could hope that he could cut that deficit as latent provisional ballots come in. It's unclear if this boost from California's win will add up with other states enough to reach the 1991. So it shows you a little bit there. Now looking at some totals here from Super Tuesday, what we have so far is with the California totals, Biden at 566 and Bernie at 501. Now this the leaderboard and kind of results were tallied by the Associated Press. Demographics from 5-year sample U.S. Census Bureau American Community Survey. You'll hear about this quite a bit going on there. To know about this is the LA Times. This is they will both face strike challenges running against Trump. This is by Janet Hook Harper. This is also on the 4th. It is one thing essential for Democrats as they look to taking on Trump is a nominee who can drive strong and perhaps historic turnout. It will be a turnout election, yet the party is now barreling towards a nominating convention with the race mostly whittled down to two candidates in their late 70s. Not a good idea there. Bernie and Biden will face critical tests in remaining states in the primary. To beat Trump is going to take an all-above approach. And we saw in the midterm election expand the youth turnout, which Biden has not been very good at, expand turnout amongst people of color, and continue to win crossover voters and better educated independent Republicans. That's from Tom Bayer, the chief executive of a Target Smarter Democratic analytics firm. Whoever the Democrats nominate is going to have to check all of those boxes. Are confident that the challenge will prove easier to overcome than the challenges Trump faces in rebuilding his own winning coalition. Part of that's going to be on COVID-19, no doubt about that. Every campaign insists it's poised to draw groups of voters who've not been enthusiastic about their politics, and a pitch crossover ideology, demographic boundaries, as President Obama did. But Obama, the relative newcomer to the national stage, then charged into his race free of the burdens of both Biden and Sanders, particularly when you look at Biden. He's going to talk about building a big coalition. That's from his campaign manager. He's committed to being a unifier, and that's something he's talked about also. This is somebody whose campaign is fundamentally about hope and optimism, but I think you're going to have to hear a lot more of that from the vice president, continuing about what to expect. That's from Eric Garcetti, co-chair of Biden's campaign. Now, remember, he's the mayor there, and he is also a Biden supporter. Aviator glasses, his campaign talks about student debt, sexual violence. He drew 17% of the vote under 40 on Super Tuesday. Biden's events routinely feature far more gray-haired than nose rings. His old-school political style, his daily reference to dead politicians like Fritz Hollings, I'm probably the only around to remember him, and sends generational message many young Democrats believe isn't working for them, no doubt about that. From Gearing, a Democratic Post unaffiliated with any candidate. Some of this is about policy, some of this is about tone and mindset and body language. The vice president's lackluster results with Latinos compound the question, no doubt about that. Democrats have long sought in the Sun Belt, notably in Arizona, in Texas. That's why Bernie did really well in Texas. This is a campaign which is trying to bring, and is not easy, people who have not been involved in the political process. That's what Bernie said in Vermont. The other major problem the Vermont senator has worked feverishly to fix, without much success, the lack of support amongst African Americans. That is unfortunate, because Bernie supported African Americans in Chicago by being literally beaten and drug away by Chicago PD. This week, those voters once again showed little enthusiasm for him, according to this article here. Failure to generate big turnouts among African American votes contributed to Clinton's loss, notably in Pennsylvania and Michigan. Well, one of the things that's going to happen here, follows O.J. Simpson will have to turn out, but so will young people and Latinos. And Bernie has been doing better with Latinos, Latinos, not only with Latinos, but African Americans. One of the problems you had in South Carolina was the political class there, including the leader there of the African American political class, Clyburn, supported Biden. And the word went out to all others in North Carolina, in South Carolina, in the Democratic Party. So when you look at the Democratic Party establishment and where they stand, this is where you have some problems. Our friends from Louisiana, I think I will go ahead and save them until tomorrow and bring them into the fold here when we talk about, we'll do that. But they are one of the better ones. I just wanted to mention them here. One of the better, they're out of Louisiana. I just wanted to get them up here. Now this is JMC, thoughts on Super Tuesday. I'll go ahead and do that real quickly here. Posted on the 2nd. Make no mistake, Super Tuesday is a significant election day. 14 states in 5 time zones. This is actually before. I'm going to get the one afterwards. So and this was, since polls closed for these, anyway, voting is continuing now. That would be the Central Time Zone. You had Alabama, Arkansas, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Texas. And a big question is here in Minnesota: can Klobuchar's votes transfer to Biden? In fact, they did. The Twin Cities, so Bernie win would not, in our opinion, be particularly surprising. Yeah, well, Alabama, of course, the African American population there, combined with the fact there's a robust contest. Now that contest there, a runout between Tuberville, the former coach at Auburn, Beauregard. Let's see where old Beauregard Sessions goes. Trump is still despising him. All these characters claim that they're close to Trump. And the only one was in the Pacific Zone. So we'll have to, let me see here, we'll have to go back to that one. I'm not sure if that was the one we wanted to bring up or not. From here, now here's, make no mistake, it's a significant election day. This is on the 4th year. So we'll have to go back to JMC Enterprises, JMC Analytics actually. We'll go back to them on the week that was. This is Boston Red in the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth on the 6th of March 2020. We'll see you on the week that was. We've almost finally got our open source report finished. And as far as numbers, man, yeah, there'll be some numbers out later today. Reports out. What is it, jobs report, everything? Anyway, it'll be a report. And we have the beige book, so we have plenty to look at. Some numbers from China. So we'll have all those on the week that was. Should be on Saturday morning. If it's not extended, it'll be a little later than that. Good day and have a good weekend.